off with some introductions. I had great conversations with both gentlemen on stage already. My name is Caroline. I work for Serotonin, which is a go-to-market agency, and we would love to hear from our wonderful AI panelists. Maybe we'll start with you, Chris.
Awesome, thank you. So my name is Christian. I'm co-founder and CEO of My Network. My Network has been productizing FHE for the last 2 years. Fully homomorphic encryption is the holy grail of cryptography. It's been considered that in academia for decades, but it just became applicable in the last decade and a half, but we've been applying it to certain kinds of data in crypto for the last 2 years. So what that means is you can process encrypted data in ciphertext form without having to decrypt it, put it in plain text. So this would be a massive upgrade for the web, and we've focused our productization thus far mostly in AI and DeFi.
Wonderful, thank you. And maybe we'll go over to you, Ben, a bit of an introduction, what you guys are up to.
Sure, yep, so I'm Ben, co-founder and CEO of Gensyn. Gensyn's building the network for machine intelligence. We build very low-level software, so close to the hardware, you can think of it as, in the machine learning space, but using various technologies from crypto and Web3. So the main kind of 4 things that we do are build execution frameworks, a compiler to allow machine learning operations to be done on any device in the world, not just NVIDIA GPUs. So theoretically, you could use laptop CPUs, you could use AMD GPUs, etc. We build communication frameworks to allow those devices to talk to each other within machine learning tasks. So you could split neural networks, for example, over many different devices, even across laptops and GPUs. We build verification tech that allows you to trust those devices without trusting the person who owns them. So if you sent a set of operations to a GPU in a data center, you wouldn't need to sign any kind of contract with the owner of that data center. Programmatically, trust would be assured through, in some ways, cryptographic proofs, in some ways you could use variations of fully homomorphic encryption for this, and also for privacy reasons. But we have our own cryptographic proofs, probabilistic proofs, etc. And then finally, we do coordination. So imagine all the devices in the world are able to do machine learning tasks, talk to each other, trust each other without humans involved. How do you get them to do something en masse? And so we have our own chain that allows you to coordinate those devices. So you can split a machine learning task across thousands, millions, even billions of devices using this coordination tech and know exactly what was done by who and do attribution back to the people who are involved.
Great, thank you. It's very, very different in terms of what you guys are doing within the AI space anyway, but I would love to hear, and we're just like throwing spice up front, right? What's an unpopular opinion you hold about AI, but you're willing to stick your neck out and defend it? So maybe I'll start off with you, Kristen, and then move over to Ben.
Yeah, I think the very unpopular take right now is that the current AI products that we have can't last. None of us want that version of the web. I think that's an unpopular take because so many people are using Anthropic or Gemini, ChatGPT, Grok. But if you look out 5-10 years, where this goes is that basically a handful of companies are aggregating a heck of a lot of IP for businesses as well as user information, public and private data, and we've seen so far that it's so much power to be aggregated in the hands of a few companies, and then those companies become so big and they're multi-trillion-dollar companies, so it becomes a matter of national security by the government in the jurisdiction they're operating in to have backdoors. So this backdoor conversation is very popular right now. We're seeing France is pushing for this. There's been a large upswell in Europe to basically for the governments of Europe to have access to tech companies and have this backdoor access. That won't stop. That'll continue for the next 10-15 years. They'll probably win because they'll make a really good case that it's a matter of national security. And I think that version of the web doesn't work for the most amount of people. I don't think it's basically what we're going is it's either no privacy, completely transparent, or you build it on decentralized rails and you offer fragmented, personalized, customized, private data protection, individual granular data protection. It's one road or the other. And the road that we're going down right now doesn't work, but it's the one that has a lot more momentum. It's got much more mature products. It's got a rich user base, and so we're not on the right path. It's probably an unpopular take right now.
And the crazy thing is a lot of the Web 2 users probably don't even know this, but they're giving away a lot of voluntary information each time they're asking Grok or ChatGPT some questions, right? What about yourself, Ben? What is your unpopular take, but you would definitely defend it?
I think I strongly agree with Christian that we're going down the wrong path. I think what I would say is there's a lot of chat within AI about reaching AGI or ASI, like artificial superintelligence or something like that. These definitions broadly make no sense to me because everybody has a different definition. They get redefined constantly. But there's something for us to rally around, right? So whatever your definition of artificial superintelligence is, my view is it absolutely cannot be reached by any of these singular attempts by companies. So kind of jumping on top of what Christian was saying, A, the way those companies are developing AI right now is bad for the world, but also B, my opinion is it will not take us to the next kind of level of like human evolution, as it were. Like if you view technology as like human kind of social evolution now, I think we plateau unless we build things differently. And to build things differently, I think you have to build the tools to allow it to emerge from everyone rather than try and build the one perfect model which represents superintelligence. And so within the kind of centralized world, you'll see people raise absolutely enormous amounts of money. Ilya Sutskever just raised billions for SSI. Mira Murati's raised billions, I think, for thinking machines. We've got Anthropic, we've got OpenAI, etc. I think all of these attempts are going to fail at achieving the next real unlock of technology. They'll probably be temporally successful as products, but in reality they won't take us to the next stage, because what we need to get to the next stage is thousands of those companies. We need to enable them to exist, to be created and then fail and then be created from the ashes, basically build ecosystems. And I think that's very familiar probably to the people in this room, but it's not familiar to people within AI. And so I think, most of these attempts, all of these attempts will fail. You have to build the infrastructure and the ecosystems to actually get to the next unlock level. You can't just build this perfect model which will be super intelligence. That won't be how it will exist.
Yeah, I like that thought process of having ecosystems and also in some ways specialization in knowledge, right? Because what my unpopular take is, just adding in my 2 cents to this, is I actually think AI is getting dumber. The open AI stuff that we're using on a day-to-day, mostly because of all the machine learning that they're learning from a whole host of different people asking it and inputting stupid answers and questions into the system and the machine chowing down on that data.
Just to jump on it, I think on Twitter right now there's a big movement talking about how it's very sycophantic suddenly, and that's basically because of human preference optimization, where they're designing these models to capture human attention, which is exactly what happened with social media, and is probably why social media became terrible. Because it's just designed, like YouTube, it's just designed to keep you on the platform, but it's not designed for you to have a good experience. And we're following down the same path, because this is a highly competitive product where actually they don't care about whether it's net kind of useful to the world. They care about whether you sit in front of it for slightly longer. And so we could fall into it, in many ways we could fall into the same trap as social media here. And I think the only way we don't is if we build, again, open ecosystems to allow lots of competition to happen across many, many different product variants, rather than just being forced to pick between Claude or GPT and that's it. And they're both doing exactly the same thing.
Go for it.
Well, I was gonna say, yeah, I totally agree with that, Ben. And the problem too is, it's not, you can say we create open ecosystems all you want. At the end of the day, you have to incentivize users to come and play and try these products out, which is hard to do because the products in decentralized AI just aren't as mature yet. So the one thing we have going for us is allowing better economic distribution of technological advancements. So to say, look, you couldn't get into OpenAI early to receive that upside and to get those multiples, but you can, in the tokenized economy, you can invest in Gensyn, you can invest in AI projects that give you that upside potential. So you get users that way, you bootstrap using tokenomics, but then at some point you do have to make good products that work. And another way I think to do that is, right now, the way these models are trained happens in a black box. So we know, Ben's right, there's this whole thread on Twitter about the sycophantic models, because they're basically just telling people what they want to hear. And so they're telling people like you're God. So, we basically have a narcissistic training engine being created right before our eyes for unsuspecting users across the world. It's going to tell you what you want to hear, it's going to tell you that you're fantastic, it won't disagree with you, it'll even give you wrong information. So how do we change the alignment of these models? That's kind of a fun user experience. If you have products that allow users, thousands around the world, to help align the models and to be conscious of their feedback, if we can tokenize those rewards, here's another way to play the game, to develop products. You're not just receiving financial upside, you're also actively participating in the development of the model in a conscious way, not in an unconscious way like you're doing with centralized AI, where the inference that's being spit back to you is a product of your own, mental machinations. You don't really realize it, but a more conscious way that I think people can get excited about. So these are some of the advantages that decentralized AI brings to the table, I think.
Yeah, I love how you guys will cut right through the chase for the second question, which was, do we actually need decentralization for AI, right? I think it's quite interesting because we were just talking about how in Dubai, the hottest topics are stablecoins, RWAs, and AI really doesn't take much of a centerfold here in terms of the conversation. So what I really wanted to drill into was, for AI to succeed, you guys both are firm believers of decentralization model, right? Is there any counter arguments that would put forward to that? And in fact, what we're seeing in the markets, a lot of these big companies, they aren't using the decentralized model. Do you think that they will be coming on board? Are you hearing noise and chatter in the space? Or perhaps you guys are helping them with incentives to help them onboard this new model? Are you guys doing anything in that space?
So from our side, we've been building infrastructure for a long time. We're in testnet right now, but we're still rolling out our infrastructure. So it's very, again, like I said before, very low level. Like we build a compiler, for example. Selling a compiler to somebody is quite a really specific thing to do. And so, like Christian said, you have to productize before you can really get this technology out into people's hands. And so we're going through that process right now. But I think realistically for AI specifically, the main first wave will come from open source, in my opinion. You won't go straight to enterprise and say, hey, use this full kind of decentralized suite of technologies for your AI development, because their requirements aren't to solve some problem that decentralization solves. They're still trying to figure out how AI even works. They just need a really simple API to use. They need SOC 2 compliance and things like that. They need all of the usual things that enterprise needs, and the technology just isn't mature enough to serve that market yet, realistically, outside of some very bespoke use cases like sovereign models and things where you go into governments and saying, actually, you want this thing to be owned by the people, etc. But they're quite niche. So I think realistically, we'll see it come as a wave of developer support and developer onboarding. We'll see smaller companies using it, startups realizing that they can get an edge through using a decentralized version rather than a centralized version, and it'll grow as a kind of groundswell from there. But enterprise, in my opinion, will come to adopt decentralized AI later, because decentralization typically adds quite a few overheads for enormous benefit, but enormous derivative benefit. It's not the first problem. It solves later problems and scaling problems, and enterprises are still at the solve the first problem stage, in my opinion.
Yeah, so just to piggyback on Ben's point, in tech, if you're winning the game, if you have market share, you're winning your market, you close source. If you're behind, you open source, right? This is what Mark did. Lambda of Meta is open source because he was behind the AI game. So what MindUp was done, we got DeepSeek to integrate our model, our SDK, and that was part of a concerted effort to go after the open source, and we'll continue to do that, the open source communities, because this is where rising stars can show their chops. This is where they can make a name for themselves. Anyone that's got a chip on their shoulder trying to prove it, this is where they can express that. So it's really important to focus on open source communities for sure.
Right. And so with this kind of technology that we're putting forth, what do you think is also the first kind of application use cases that you'll see being adopted, right? So maybe specific to the protocols you guys are running right now. We touched upon this a little bit, but maybe we'll just give it to an audience and learn a little bit more about what you guys are working on, right? Interesting apps, interesting arenas that you guys can apply your tech towards, or what you'd be excited to see onboarding your tech.
Yeah, so from our side, you can kind of split this into two angles. You've got the pure Web 2 machine learning angle. These people don't really know anything about crypto. They don't want to be exposed to it necessarily. In many cases, they actually strongly dislike it. For those people, there are a few angles for us very initially. One example is local execution of models that can call out to some degree of remote execution as well to scale up. So right now, think of using Cursor to do coding. when you use Cursor right now, you're calling out to a model remotely via Claude's API or something like that. All of your data is being passed to this remote model. I think a lot of people would prefer if that was executing on their local device, but getting a model that's effective, operates on your local device, and consistently improves and stays up to date is very difficult. Right now, you'd have to be an AI researcher to basically do that. You'd have to be constantly retraining your model. But using our frameworks, you can do that. And so I can create a model which, or I can take an existing open source model, I can run it locally on my laptop, and then I can train it with thousands of other models around the world, and our models can talk to each other and they can learn to get better collaboratively. I'm not leaking information to you. I'm not sending you all of my Cursor logs. I'm not sending you my code. All I'm doing is allowing my model to talk to other models, and they're all improving. And you can do that for any use case. So any reason why somebody would want to call out to a model, you can replace that that remote model running in an API with a local model that improves alongside other models. So that's one really interesting angle on the pure machine learning side. You need to know nothing about crypto for that. On the crypto side, you've got interesting things where you hook in some of that training, some of that collaborative machine learning with identity and attribution, and so people can contribute to those systems with an existing on-chain identity, and then track reputation through time. They can track the contributions they've made. So if my model improves your model, we can know that, and in the future there can be rewards for that. There can be value moved around on-chain based on the effectiveness of these models. And then if you scale that up and say, actually, all of these thousands of models talking to each other, they create one large meta model. In that case, we've co-trained a model which could be used somewhere else. When we've done that, we have a full record of who contributed. So if I contributed data, that's tracked. If I contributed the model architecture itself, that's tracked. And so you can create these value flows back to the people who actually originated the ideas, the data, the human knowledge and labeling data samples, etc., all the way through a full kind of on-chain identity trail back to those individuals. And obviously you can tokenize things and you can pass value through that chain. So I think that becomes really interesting. And there's tons of different use cases for that. Model ownership is just one of them. But yeah, we build the kind of infrastructure underneath. So using our chain, you can build all of those use cases.
You want to say like one use case that you're super excited about?
I guess the model ownership one. So it's this idea that instead of OpenAI training a model using all the data of the internet and then renting it out for people to use, we could all get together and we could train a model together. When we do that, if we trained it using our tech, we could have that attribution back to everybody. So it could be a crowdsourced trained model. There's a smart contract that you could contribute funds to, and then everybody involved can be paid for exactly the work they contributed to this model. And then when that model is used in the future, every inference step, you could have value flow back to every single individual. It's quite hard to do, but you can attribute the sample of an inference query all the way back to the data the weighted record of who contributed data for that query. So imagine kind of a flow chart of somebody's paying, I don't know, a fraction of a cent for an inference query, and that splits up and goes back to the original people who contributed. You obviously couldn't do that with Visa and MasterCard because it would be crazy. But on chain you can. You've got these super granular payments to track all of those queries. And so in the future, you could have an OpenAI API, which is actually fully open. The model behind it was created by thousands or millions of people. All the resources were provided by those people. There's no one party who designed it, created the data set, created the labeling of the samples or anything. It was all crowdsourced.
Super interesting. All right.
That's compelling, yeah. And so we're trying to support that vision, that idea. So in that model that Ben just proposed, there's a lot of data that you can protect there. So if you want to be able to assign, if you want to be able to track the data coming from users to train the model or whatever, if it's protected with FHE and it remains in ciphertext, you're just adding another layer of protection, number one. But number two, it also makes this easier you can give leverage. The leverage goes to the right party, right? Because the keys to unlock the data can be held by the actual owner, the contributor themselves. So now they actually have leverage to actually enforce this and to kind of protect their own interests and kind of, we can actually have true, discovery of the market rate of certain types of data, which I think is really important. So FHE would do that. In a similar vein, what we did with DeepSeek was, if you think of one of the big problems with centralized AI is the privacy issue, sharing your data. So DeepSeek did a wonderful thing where they finally open sourced a model requiring less GPU compute that showed you can optimize the software and still have a performant model. Awesome. It's now available to thousands of SMBs and crypto projects around the world. So everybody now has a chance to punch up and compete with the big guys. But we still have the same data privacy concerns because they're still going to be taking the data they can get their hands on, public scraping, whatever, and the data used for the early users will contribute their data, the inference. So it's a security nightmare. It's great at level playing field, but it's even more of a data privacy, data security issue. So what we allow is for them to actually use FHE to protect the inference, some of the trading data, and certainly user data. So that's an application that we're really excited about.
Yeah, I think we were talking about how this is an interesting part if you put it into healthcare as well, right? So I don't know if you want to go a little bit deeper on that because I thought that was a super interesting topic of utilizing data and actually crowdsourcing via healthcare data and whether or not you can improve surgical procedures based on that.
Yeah, my issue before, I'm old enough to have had a career before crypto for like a decade. And the problem was we were developing AI for medical technology, and we had the same, I saw the same problem with dozens of companies, which is like, you could get a model to 92% effectiveness or accuracy, but you can't go to market with that. That's like thousands, hundreds of thousands of people dying on the operating table. So you need to get to like 99 plus, and in order to do that, a good example is that we were using AI in surgical navigation, and you could have, I think we had something like, it was like we had 30,000 scans that we had trained the AI on, 30,000 individual CBTC scans, so 3D images, to get to 92% effective rate. In order to get to 98, you think, okay, well, if you got 30,000 scans, got to 92, what do you need, like another 30, 20, 15 to get to 99? No, you need like 30 million. To get that level of accuracy, you need so much more data, and there's no incentive scheme that we've seen today that allows large data holders like insurance providers, providers themselves, insurance payers, to give any data to smaller startups that want to do something with it, that are nimble and can actually productize faster. There's no incentive structure, certainly in a centralized world, to do that. So crypto actually presents that for all the reasons that we've said here. But then if you take it one step further and you go, look, in DeSci, for example, if you want to run a global trial and you want to have users around the world coordinate to give their data to enter into a program, into a test, and you can encrypt that data, you remove probably the number one hurdle to ever doing this before. I mean, DeSci is not a new idea. These guys have been trying, Pfizer's been running these studies for 30 years to try to run global clinical trials, because that's one of the most expensive parts of the productization journey for pharmaceuticals and drugs. So if you can truly decentralize that, protect the data, and make sure everyone's getting compensated because that data is actually protected and it's unique to that specific cause, you are opening up a whole world of customized medicine backed with AI that can know you, your genome, your patient history. Imagine being able to upload your aunts, your uncles, your parents' history in a way. I mean, right now, I don't think there's one entity on planet Earth that anyone would feel comfortable giving all that data to. Your genome, your health visits, the health visits of your uncle, your parents, your aunts, your whatever, so that you could have a full profile. But if you had FHE, you could now do this, submit it in a secure way, no one gets to see the plain text, and now you can run AI on top of the encrypted data to generate insights, predictive analysis. It would be a complete boom in healthcare and health tech innovations.
Right. So, we still have some time left. Love to actually then go deeper into some of the spicier questions, right? We talk about all the hypotheticals of what, not hypothetical, some of it is already existent, right? But a lot of hypotheticals of what could happen if AI went decentralized. What are some of the flaws that no one's willing really to talk about? And perhaps you guys do, but no one's really willing to talk about in this space about AI and decentralization that we actually have to solve for first before we can actually get mass adoption.
Sure. So I'll split my answer into two. One, the first half, the social flaws, and the second half, the technical. Social flaws, I think the space of decentralization, or like crypto in general, moves too rapidly and gets attached to hype cycles too quickly, which results in slower development of technology overall. I think we get very excited about proofs of concept. We can do very effective capital allocation into those proof of concepts, but then following through to make that proof of concept reality has not been too successful so far in many different arenas. So different technologies that have come through the decentralized space at different times, you can take learnings from them. And so when we think about decentralized AI, we look a lot at ZK as a technology because that came kind of a wave earlier, but went through a very similar cycle to what we're seeing with AI, where huge attention, huge excitement about it, but the actual technical solution was incredibly hard to build. And so it didn't really happen as fast as the hype cycles happen, which means that you then get this kind of trough of disillusionment that you have to come back out of again. And I think the space in general has a big problem with that. It disincentivizes real builders and it incentivizes people who see a marketing opportunity to exit with a chunk of cash, create intergenerational wealth, and then just disappear. And I think that's a huge problem with the space.
So basically, actually, don't talk about it until you've actually built the product.
Pretty much, yeah. So that's the social aspect. On the technical side, I think this technology is really hard. Like, it's hard to build. Typically, it comes with like technical downsides as well as the upsides. We kind of hinted at this before. One of the biggest ones with decentralization is technology is communication costs. You increase communication costs everywhere when you decentralize things. It just makes it much less efficient to do things that would be more efficient in a centralized context, which a lot of the time you still need to do those things as well as the decentralized things. And I think the space has dealt with this in different ways. Early on, it was incredibly ideological, where people refused to centralize anything, and everything had to be decentralized, which held things back because actually there's efficiencies to centralizing some aspects, and as long as you know exactly which should be decentralized, that can be okay, which the space is learning. But in general, you still have those overheads which you need to match against the benefits that you get. And so if the benefits that you're unlocking by using decentralization don't outweigh the costs of it, you just shouldn't use it. And I think people find it difficult to actually balance that equation. And ideology goes with this, right? If you're blinded by ideology where the benefit to you is like, for some reason, magnified because of the ideology, that doesn't mean it'll actually work as a product in the real world, which crypto's learned time and time and time again. So pragmatism within applying the technology, doing a real kind of calculation of what is the ROI of applying this here, do I absolutely need it here or not, I think is the way forward. But again, we still struggle with that. It's probably one of the biggest difficulties here. Socially, we have to somehow break out of this hype cycle that incentivizes the wrong people building the wrong way. And then technically, we have to get really rigorous with the cost-benefit calculation to apply the technology only where we need it, not everywhere, because then it won't actually work as a product. It'll just stay this ideological thing.
Super fair point. Christian, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I agree with them, but I think the problem is you can't remove the hype. The hype brings speculation, speculation brings capital, and we need that, unfortunately, so it's kind of a necessary evil.
Agreed.
I think the problem from where I see it is the hardware side. The models that we have today that we're all using are superclusters that were networked together. So geographic proximity matters, and this is why I think the work that Gensyn is doing and IONET, Exhibits is so important, is optimizing the hardware side. I don't know yet if we can make performant models, competitive models in decentralized AI to compete with the big models if we don't solve that problem, if we don't have a lot of clusters that are networked together in a geographical space, because it's close. And then, I mean, you have Satya Nadella at Microsoft is talking about inference fleets. So he wants to have a separate, fleet of GPUs that are closer to where inference happens. So there's a geolocational or like a proximity situation that we have to figure out. Can we make models as performant and as big and as fast in decentralized AI to actually compete? That's the way I still see it. I still look at it as like a David and Goliath. I know a lot of folks don't look at that. Ben, I'd be interested to hear your take on that. It's like, do you see it, is it a direct competition to get share? Do we have to figure that out? Or are we still kind of just like, let's solve this problem first and see where we are with market share later?
I strongly agree with the geographical point, but I view it as a derivative of communication cost at the end of the day, especially on inference. Like you say, one of the biggest points with inference is latency. And so what you're optimizing to get the best customer experience is the quickest response to a customer query. In reality, I think that leads to enormous scale networks, as close to the user as possible. We're already seeing like Cloudflare disrupt AWS because of this. They're putting GPUs close to the user. Like you said, Microsoft trying to do the same thing. I think in the short term, that means these caching networks, the CDNs, actually win if they get hardware in the right places. But ultimately, long term, I think decentralization wins for this because it can get the maximum coverage possible. Whether that's a single network that tries to take everything, or whether actually it's a network of networks is to be seen. The way we think about it is you need to have the rails to actually make the communication and the computation happen. That's the main thing that needs to exist. If you can create that, then you could have competition over the ownership of the devices. You could have somebody come along and say, hey, I'm going to set up a network of data centers in the best places, and they are going to serve the most customer queries. Our view is underneath, they'll run our software. So we make the software to make that emerge. That was somewhat of my view around the kind of future of artificial superintelligence, not coming from one company, it's coming from the emergence on top of infrastructure. So I do think there will, back to your question, I do think there will be a scramble to get the kind of best hardware in the best places and the best relationships, but underneath it all, it needs the infrastructure to make it actually efficiently work. And so we kind of step aside from that scramble and say, we'll just build the infrastructure.
That's awesome.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. There's lots of food for thought here. Yeah, I know, the time went up. I was just like, we had 10 minutes, but yeah, lots of food for thought, and I think, definitely let's keep an eye on the space. Hopefully the hype does live up to the products that's being pushed out in the space as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.